My name is Mary Biles. I'm a medical cannabis journalist and writer. I'm also an author of the CBD Book. I have a podcast about cannabis called Cannabis Voices, and I genuinely educate about the medicinal properties of the cannabis plant. I went to university in York and I studied politics. I was quite innocent really in those years, very kind of certainly cannabis naive was the term we use in the industry. When I kind of became more exposed to life, I guess, was when I finished university and I spent 3 years living in Madrid, teaching English and spending a lot of time in nightclubs. And yeah, then went back to London and was working in TV for about 12 years on the production side. And I then left London and spent 10 years living in Andalusia in southern Spain, where I was teaching English, and then that's kind of when my journey towards cannabis started. 2 or 3 years down the line, I started writing myself. I realised I didn't have a kind of creative outlet after finishing in TV, and I just started writing a blog about Seville, about the city, the people, and from that I started writing other things, including about plant medicine. By that time, I became interested in ayahuasca, which is plant medicine from the Amazon jungle, and wrote something for CNN about that. And I guess the whole experience with ayahuasca opened my mind, my heart, everything, my spirit to the healing powers of plants really. So it was during this time, a really good friend of mine, her mum had pancreatic cancer, and so she was dying basically. She'd had chemo, radiotherapy, and at the time she was kind of taking morphine and all the stuff that you get given when you're in a lot of pain and you're dying. The morphine for her, it wasn't really helping with the pain. She'd lost all lucidity, she was really confused. It was horrendous basically. And this was in Belgium, where there was some kind of grey area if a doctor felt that a kind of unlicensed medicine was in the interest of their patient, they could prescribe it. So she was prescribed cannabis oil. And yeah, I just remember the conversation with my friend in my kitchen, and when she was telling me about the difference it made. She wasn't in pain, she was completely lucid, she had a little bit of appetite, so she could eat, which when you're dying of cancer, the last thing you want to do is eat anything. And she just had quality of life basically, and could sort of live those last few weeks with dignity. And I say live because she's dying, but she was also still living, and for her family this was a tremendous gift. And when I heard it, on the one hand I was like, wow, this is amazing, but on the other hand I was so angry that this simple human right to die with dignity was denied, or was being denied to so many people, millions of people around the world. So I promised to Anna, my friend, I said, I'm going to do something about this. And so I kind of trundled off there was a hemp fair in Seville, and I had my press pass, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to talk to some people, do some research, make some contacts, learn about the plant. And while I was there, I just chatted to this lady whose son had a CBD company, quite a well-known CBD company at that time and still is, and they were looking for a full-time writer. Before I knew it, I was having an interview with the head of marketing, and 2 weeks after promising my friend that I was going to do something about this injustice, I was working full-time in the cannabis industry.
So 2 years ago, medicinal cannabis was made legal here in the UK, and yet patients still do not have access aside from private clinics and very expensive prescriptions. What do you think has gone wrong?
I really feel for the people, the parents, the patients who 2 years ago had such tremendous hope that they were now going to get access finally after all these years of fighting to medicinal cannabis. I think it was always going to be a gradual process. I think there were expectations that were given by, I guess it was Matt Hancock at the time, I'd have to check that, but the health secretary at the time, there were huge expectations that were given that they would now have access. It had been descheduled to schedule or rescheduled to Schedule 2, and finally medicinal cannabis is legal. So I think there were probably assumptions that were made by patients that it would then be available through the NHS. I know at the time, you know, in doctors' surgeries, they had to put up signs basically saying, do not ask us, we can't prescribe you medicinal cannabis. I think you have to remember that this is the NHS. The NHS is a finite pot of money. So for them, it's a matter, I think, you know, NICE, which is the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, they have their kind of, it's a bit like the kind of computer says no, you know, from Little Britain. It's like, you know, you put in how much it costs, you put in the evidence, which in this case, they favour the randomised controlled trials. I think if there's 5 randomised controlled trials that exist, that's the evidence that kind of gets fed into the computer. If it's expensive, which, you know, cannabis medicine until now has been, that also gets fed into the computer. What's the result that comes out? Okay, it's neither is it effective for controlling or for the condition, and, you know, if we're talking about chronic pain, for you know, bringing about benefit to these patients, and it's really, really expensive. So they say, no, sorry, it's not available through the NHS. This idea of cannabis being a gateway drug, okay, so the connotation that it's always a gateway to something negative, you know, heroin, psychosis or whatever, but actually what happens in general is that cannabis is a gateway to better health, better relationships, a better life basically. So it's just kind of turning it's on its head, this idea of cannabis being a gateway drug, and actually valuing quality of life. I mean, that's massive. I mean, when you take, for example, with these, you know, the parents of the kids with autism and epilepsy who get tremendous benefits in many cases with cannabis-based medicines, it's not just about the child. It's not just about the child. It's like suddenly they start to have a normal family life. You know, imagine being the parent of a child who at any time could have a seizure and die. You cannot have a normal life. You are in a state of fight or flight the entire time, and you have no life. And this is a ripple out effect. It's not just about the patient actually. So again, you know, these are the things that have to be measured in some way and spoken about, because, you know, doctors take, you know, when they're doing their training, they're not, as far as I know, they don't go into it trying to keep their patients unwell. You know, they take an oath, they take the kind of the Hippocratic oath, they kind of swear to do no harm. This is a gift. This is a gift. You know, this is actually something that's practically side effect free, can, like, for, you know, these kind of common collections of conditions, you know, the kind of the chronic pain, anxiety, sleep, etc. Just with one thing, you know, and you're not going to kind of create other problems by giving it to your patients. So I think the problem is that there's just so little education with doctors, and this is the thing that's got to change. And I think it has to come from within from the government, basically, from the NHS, which then there has to be some kind of political will to do that, because it's great, you know, you've got the kind of Cannabis Clinician Society in the UK doing training and stuff. I think drug science does as well, but these are for doctors who are already interested, basically. They're, you know, it's kind of piqued their interest. They're consultants, they maybe want to have a kind of another string to their bow, you know, with their pain patients. But this, you know, this needs to be taught at medical school. You know, this needs, and I think actually right now, young doctors are doing their training. They've got a real thirst for this. They want to know about all this, and so this needs to be taught. There's no other way around it.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your book, the CBD Book, and you talk around the hype about CBD. Do you think we're in danger of focusing too much on the individual cannabinoids and not the full plant?
There is a bit of a misnomer when people talk about CBD, basically. I'm talking the CBD that people buy online or they go to the high street. Really what that is a hemp extract. CBD is the kind of the main compound that kind of shouts the loudest and has got, you know, a lot of the press and celebrities using all the rest of it. But actually what most people have been taking is a hemp extract, which contains CBD, but it also contains other cannabinoids and terpenes, and so it is a whole plant extract. So while a lot of people have been using full spectrum products, CBD products, from April next year that is going to change. Something called novel foods has come into play. So a novel food is basically a food that hadn't formed part of our diets on a kind of regular basis prior to 1997. So you can argue, and it has been argued by the European Industrial Hemp Association, that hemp has been part of our diet for thousands of years, and it has been. So, and also, while people might have been kind of consuming the seeds, there are cannabinoids present, in trace amounts on the seeds as well. They'd also found evidence that, I think in the Vatican, that was like, ravioli stuffed with hemp flowers and all the rest of it. So hemp has been part of our diet for a long time. Unfortunately, with kind of prohibition, it kind of fell out of favour, and we haven't been consuming it for the last 70 years. But anyway, it was decided that CBD and cannabinoids in general are novel foods, which means that in order to sell them legally, companies have to make an application for a novel foods license, showing that it's safe, that it's non-toxic, and that it's not going to damage our health, basically, to consume it as part of our food. For a novel food to be approved, it cannot contain a narcotic, okay, in any amounts. These full-spectrum products contain a tiny amount of THC, trace levels, but THC is a narcotic, according to the 1961 single conventional narcotic drugs. So in order for a company to make a valid and acceptable novel food application, it cannot be for full-spectrum products. Okay, so that whole sector, if things continue, and I think they will, is going to disappear, basically. So what you're going to have are products that are kind of isolate-based. So you may think, actually, this is the kind of thing with CBD, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You think, if CBD is so great, surely we want it in its kind of purest form and take as much of it as possible. But actually, what studies show is CBD, with all its friends, like it's kind of like, so CBD is the protagonist in the movie, and you have its supporting cast, just kind of like, kind of making it look good and all the rest of it, and filling in the kind of gaps. Products that contain the entourage of all the compounds actually are more effective. So that kind of the most effective version of CBD oil is going to disappear, and we're going to be left with isolate, which it's okay, it works more or less, but normally you have to take more of it to get the same effect.
The public's attitude on cannabis and how it's actually changing here in the UK, how many more people are opening it up, and you can actually have sensible conversations with people, where if you went back maybe 5 years ago and you started talking about cannabis and CBD or THC levels, there would be much more of a brick wall to have those conversations, whereas now those conversations seem to really be opening up in the general public. So would you say that the public's attitude is starting to change here in the UK? Yeah,
I would say that the public's attitude is starting to change. I mean, I always use kind of like my mum or my aunt as a kind of barometer, really, for public opinion. My mum sadly passed away, but my auntie's like 85 or something. She's an ex-nurse, and when you explain, the facts, you explain what's happened with prohibition, you give the cases, such as the children with epilepsy. They are always the ones that kind of seem to, break through, in people's understanding of the plant, because you can't argue with that. And you explain that, that it is safe, that there are very few side effects, that actually, you can be fully functioning, you're not going to be sort of on the sofa eating pizza all the time. You can be a fully functioning member of society, actually functioning better than you have been until now. Usually people kind of, they consider it and they go, oh, I didn't realise. Interesting. And actually, we're an ageing population. There are going to be so many more of us who have unmet clinical needs through the medicine that is available right now, and we'll be looking for solutions, and I think of sort of personal examples of parents, of friends who, they never would have considered cannabis, and they were very frightened, actually. I had to speak to them and explain and sort of allay their fears. But they're trying it, they're going the legal route, they're going through a clinic, and they're getting great results. And I think increasingly that will happen.
So you took that, and it's actually leading on to the next question. So political will is what is needed. So how do we get to the point of getting the politicians to really pay attention to this?
I think it has to come from the electorate. So when there are more people within the voting population who this is important to them, it's the same with the environment. It's like, while it isn't kind of up there in terms of priorities of the electorate, they're not really going to be that asked, to be honest. So, I think the more people realise that actually cannabis could be a solution, or at least give them better quality of life. And that comes from, things like this, getting the information out there, and information that feels believable, and it's based on facts, and it's people that they can relate to. So, I guess in the past, without kind of, tarring everyone with the same brush, but perhaps, people might say, oh, this is just for hippies or whatever. But, this is something, medicine for everyone. This isn't kind of some exclusive club. This is like something that can help all of us. And I think when that message gets across, then enough people's attitudes will shift. And I think that could create the change with government, when there's a kind of the momentum from the people. And cannabis has always been people-led. That's the bottom line.
In your own personal terms, what would your ideal outcome for cannabis be in the UK?
My ideal scenario for the cannabis industry in the UK would be safe access for everybody. So not just medicinal, because anyway, there's a kind of continuum between what is what is recreational and what is medicinal. So if you're, as a lot of people do, you smoke in the evenings to help you sleep, or just to kind of relax after a day's work, that kind of sounds a little bit medicinal for me. That sounds like the kind of thing that you might actually be given a pill for from the doctors. So yeah, it's not kind of like, it's not so cut and dry what medicinal is and what recreational is, but whatever it is, it should be about harm reduction, so people can access it safely, because they're always going to try and access it. They always are. And it should be regulated. It should be regulated so that maybe, I don't know, there's a kind of a cap on THC for kids of a certain age, for example, so they're less likely to get completely stoned every day and, kind of mess up their neural networks or whatever, and, which, so I think, regulation. I mean, it could be cannabis clubs. I don't really care what form it takes, as long as there is regulated access and it's safe and people don't have to be, and it's decriminalised. Just let's start with that, shall we? Shall we start with that? So we haven't got the likes of, dear Tony down in Cornwall, who's in his 80s, who's got, kind of stage 3 kidney disease, arthritis, glaucoma, decides to grow his own, is quite open about it. It gets confiscated by the police, he grows a bit more, gets confiscated again, and he's up in prison, in a couple of months' time. But being charged not only with cultivation, which yes, he's cultivating, but being charged with production. So they're suggesting that he's supplying other people. So this man's 80, this shouldn't be happening. So let's start with decriminalisation. If I've got arthritis and I want to grow a couple of plants, I should be allowed to grow a couple of plants. If I just want to, have a smoke after work, I should be allowed to grow a couple of plants. Basically, that's what I would like to happen. So let's start with decriminalisation and, kind of work things out from there.
My name is Sam Cannon and I am the founder of Beyond Green. On the 2nd and 3rd of December this year, the UN will vote on the World Health Organization's recommendation on the rescheduling of cannabis. This is a mammoth moment in time. Please like, comment and share these videos so that the truth can be told and that the planet and everybody on it can benefit from this truly, truly incredible plant once again. Thank you.